Welcome to Paranormal Latte Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Sit back and relax with us. Grab yourself a really good drink. Spend an hour and let's delve into a world of chatter about the mysteries of the unexplained. Whether you are a skeptic or a believer makes no difference. It's not always in your imagination. Enjoy your day. Now that was good. Now that was good. Good evening, everyone, and thanks again for joining me for yet another episode of Paranormal Latte Podcast. My name is Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. I am the host and the producer of this show. Tonight we have with us a very gifted psychic, very empathic, and used to be a trauma nurse. Emily Ann is with us, and she grew up in the Appalachian Mountains and is a 7th generation granny witch. And we had a lot to talk about regarding that. But before we get into that interview, why don't we learn just a little bit more about my very intriguing guest tonight, Emily Ann. My guest this evening is Emily Ann. Emily Ann was born and raised in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains in Hazard, Kentucky. Emily Ann is a gifted psychic medium and empath whose connection to the spiritual world is as deep and rooted as the hills she calls home. Emily Ann carries a powerful multi-generational legacy. She came to realize early in life that her profound intuition, deep empathy, and ability to communicate with spirits were not random occurrences, but potent gifts passed down through the decades. A lineage often whispered about as granny witch or intuitive wisdom. Today, Emily Ann proudly embraces the title of the modern-day granny witch. She uses her inherited abilities to cut through the confusion and static of modern life, offering clear, compassionate guidance to those seeking direction. Through mediumship, psychic abilities, and empathic energy work, she helps people connect with loved ones who have passed, validate their own paths, and find the essential answers they are looking for to live a more fulfilling and grounded life. We had a lot to talk about this evening, so sit back and enjoy the interview with the modern-day granny witch, also known as Emily Ann. Well, good evening, Emily Ann, and thank you so very much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. Emily Ann is very unique, and you're going to find out why in just a few minutes. And I thought, I'm really glad that she's on the show today. So we're going to start in as I usually do, and we're going to go with that foundation question. I want you to go way back, and I want you to tell everybody a little bit about where it all began for you.
Well, I found out after the fact that I am a 7th generation granny witch. And that brought some clarity to the things I've seen and the things I've done and what I know. My earliest memory of anything that I would consider to be paranormal happened when I was a toddler. I lived with my grandparents and my mom and dad. We had a great big family home. And I was obsessed with my grandmother, so I had to sleep next to her. Well, I was in a baby bed. I was probably too big for a baby bed at the time. I was no more than 3 because my sister had not yet been born. And this is a bizarre little fact about me. I'm obsessed with coffee. Oh. And it began when I was little. I would get up every morning and drink coffee with my grandpa at the kitchen table. That was our ritual. I had coffee every morning as a toddler baby little girl. And I woke up one morning and it was daylight, and both my grandparents were already gone from the bed, which was not usual. I was usually up when I heard my grandpa's feet hit the floor. And that morning, something else woke me up, and it was in an old Georgian style home. I wouldn't want to call it a mansion, but it was a humongous, beautiful farmhouse in the Georgian style back in the early 60s. And I looked up behind the door that was adjacent to the bedroom, and there were 2, I thought they were stuffed animals at the time. I remember thinking that because they looked like cat-like figures, and they were dark. I could make out the features, but it was very, very dark. And they went like this to me, and like, come here. And they were waving and like, come here. And I rubbed my eyes. I was wide awake. I remember it vividly. I mean, it's not like something I dreamed. It's not something that from a cartoon character when I was a child, because I was a very old child. I'm an old soul. And I remember those figures. And in researching it later on, I guess I'm going to call them cryptids of some sort. The front of that big Georgian house was on the Whitewater River. I believe rivers carry a lot of cryptid energy. That is my earliest memory of something that I couldn't explain at the time. I think I can now, but that's when I knew I was a little different. But as a child, you don't know what everybody else is seeing.
Right.
I thought, well, maybe everybody sees this. So I didn't even question it. And that is the earliest memory that I have of something that, as an adult, I figured out was probably my first experience with the paranormal. Wow. I was 2 or 3 years old. My sister was born when I was just turned 4, so I was either 2 or 3, but I was very, very young.
You know, what's really interesting is that when we go back, a lot of people don't remember the age of 2, but then they might start to remember tidbits at the age of 3. And I know that that's when I could definitely remember certain things. And I'm not saying that maybe I do remember an experience, because there's a picture of me holding a newspaper, and I probably was no more than a year and a half to 2 years old holding that newspaper. And there is a picture of me holding that. And I do remember holding that newspaper. So there are tidbits that people remember. Why things stick and why things kind of, go to the wayside, I couldn't tell you, because it wasn't traumatic in that moment. I don't know. Did you have anything real traumatic? That's interesting when they're saying, come here. Did you go there, and what did these things do?
I was in a baby bed. I was literally sleeping in the baby bed next to my grandmother. And I used to put my hand through the bars and put my hand on her at night. I don't know if it was a security thing or whatever. But I didn't. I stood up. I remember standing up in the baby bed. And I was, like I said, I was wide awake in my little flannel gown that my grandma made for me. And they stood there for a long time. And then it was like they were watching me. And then my grandmother came in and lifted me out of the bed. And I ran to that door and looked behind it thinking they might still be there. And there was nothing. But I know without a doubt in my child's mind, which I think children see things that adults do not. And I told my grandma there were 2 cats behind that door. She said, there's no cats in my house. I don't allow cats in my house. And my grandma was just the sweetest, most, she was a unique character. You had to know her to understand her. But I just let it go. I didn't think there was anything abnormal about it. I wasn't afraid. I guess it was a childlike, no fear kind of thing. But that's the first thing I remember as an adult, going back and questioning, now what was that? Because I remembered it all those years. I never forgot it. I mean, I had other things happen around the farm because, like I said, it was on the Whitewater River, and it was also on Indian grounds.
They're on ground.
And I don't know if that was related or not, because these look more like cryptids to me. Because I remember if I could draw you a picture of what they look like.
When you're saying cryptid, are you saying like short or tall grays, or are you?
They were the size of adult humans. One was a little taller than the other. There were 2 of them. There were absolutely 2 of them. And the one in front was the one who was motioning me to come. And I remember it well. And I remember running to that door, and I think I was almost disappointed there was nothing there. Because I was an adventurous little girl. I was always off in the barn and trying to ride my horse by myself. And I was in the chicken house, and I was on that farm. I was into everything. I had no fear. But I do remember that.
That's how we grow up when we grow up on a farm or out in the rural area. I mean, I can relate because that was a lifestyle I also lived myself. So Rural areas are very interesting. One, they can provide at times some seclusion and a calmness and a peace to them. It depends on who your neighbors are, of course. And on other times, there are things that can happen out there that we just don't think much of. We explore. We find things. We pick up a dried up leaf from whatever that might be just very interesting in its shape, and we're curious, and maybe we're just more in contact with nature. But that's interesting that something like that, and then of course they disappeared. Go back a little bit about your family roots a little bit, especially you are what, the seventh? Did you say seventh generation?
Seventh generation granny witch. Unfortunately, I didn't realize the wealth of knowledge that my ancestors had until it was too late to find it. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of found my own power and my own intelligence as far as what I do goes, because it was kept under wraps for the majority of my life. Mm-hmm. I remember my great grandmother. Her name was Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. She used to smoke a corncob pipe. She was the community healer, because they didn't call them granny witches back in the day. They were the healers. Mm-hmm. She would have people come to her house to get herbs. These little, they call them acidity bags, the little bags with the things in them that for healing or love spells or whatever. And at the time, you don't realize, exactly what that is, because you're a kid. I mean, and she died when I was extremely young. And then my direct grandmother, she knew all of the legends and the folklore and the stories and the things where nature crossed over and the remedies, and she knew all about that. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny, it skipped my mother. My mother had absolutely no knowledge of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where my gap really hit. And it was easier for me to just not acknowledge it than to think, I should learn this, because she had nothing, no power at all as far as that goes. But I have found I am the seventh. There were 6 prior that I found so far in my ancestry. I'm working on it right now. I have tracked it back to Massachusetts and Connecticut, Stronger in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Actually found a picture of one of my ancestors, a male picture. And my son is working on this with me. And he said, Mom, I have to send you something. He says, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. He said, just tell me what you think. Mm-hmm. And he sent me this picture that had been kind of doctored with all these new apps and everything can enhance pictures. Mm-hmm. And I honestly thought it was him that had done like an antique picture in a military uniform. I said, where'd you get that done? He said, I didn't. That's one of our ancestors. He says, we are identical. He says, it scared me when it came back. And it looks exactly like my son. Exactly like my son.
That is, you hear of this. I'm going to share a little tiny story, and then we'll get back to you when you bring that up. Because I'm going to ask a question as whether you think that there's anything to do with the reincarnation here, and I'll try to get to my point quickly. So I was talking to one of my, I don't know if it was a guest or a friend, and she was telling me how they were out in a restaurant, and her 6-year-old nephew kept looking at this 95-year-old woman. I guess she was around 95 years old. And they're in this restaurant. And the mother goes, well, what? That's rude. Stop staring at that woman. And the little child said, or the little boy said, I have to go talk to her. And so he gets out of, he leaves the table, he goes over to this older woman, and he says to her something like, I think I know who you are, something along that lines. Your name is, we'll just use Martha as an example. Your name is Martha. And she's like, yes, as a matter of fact, I am Martha. She goes, well, I am your husband who passed away, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever ago, I am your husband. And, oh, isn't he just a cute little boy? Oh, I'm so sorry that he's bothering you. No, no, no. He's got my curiosity up. You're my husband? He goes, yes, I can tell you all about the things that we used to do. We used to do this, 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 this. Your favorite thing is this, 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 this. And he went on and on and on about that. And she was like, absolutely, everyone was absolutely just amazed. Well, they turned into pen pals, this little 6-year-old and this 95-year-old woman. But he was so accurate in what he knew about her that people began to question the idea of reincarnation. So now I'm going to throw that back at you. So you have a son. He looks identical to this image that was found. What are your thoughts about that connection?
I absolutely believe in reincarnation. I know that my son is a very, very old soul. His soul is older than mine. He's got an amazing ability as well. He's a phenomenal young man. I'm very, very proud of him. We just kind of take it at face value because we both talk so much about it and we just know what we know. I know his past lives. I think he's been in New Orleans. He went to New Orleans for the first time several years back. And he said, Mom, he says, I have been there so many times. I knew the streets that I was on, that I had never been on before in this life. Mm-hmm. And he's got a very, very strong draw to New Orleans because that was a former life. And it turned out very weird. I went to New Orleans and I felt the same thing. I said, I've been here before too. And I said, I almost think that I worked for you. In a prior, I think he was an importer, and I've told him this. I said, I think you were an importer, a European importer. He's obsessed with ships. Mm-hmm. He knows things about ships he has no way of knowing, but he knows. And I said, I think you were like a merchant. You brought things to New Orleans. I said, but I don't always think you were quite on the side of total lawfulness. Mm-hmm. I said, I feel like I was your caretaker. I think I worked for you. I've had these images, and he's very into astral projection, and he's very good at it. And he's told me things that he would have no way of knowing if it wasn't a former life. When he was a little boy, he was obsessed with Cadillacs. From the age that he could talk, I mean, when he could just barely say car, he would know a Cadillac when it was coming up the street. And he had no way of knowing this. We didn't drive a Cadillac. I drove a big SUV and that kind of thing. And we never talked about Cadillacs. But when he was 2 and 3 years old, and he's also very artistic and very musical, and he sings, he plays instruments, he can draw beautifully. He could draw Cadillacs from the 50s in dimensional artwork and details down to, just the lettering on them when he was 2 and 3 years old. Cars he had never seen before. And he got known because he used to go and hang out with the GM dealers around our community. It was a small Indiana town. You know how Indiana is. And they all knew him. And then one day when he was about 5 years old, I got a call from this GM dealer that knew him. He says, is Adam there? I said, yeah. I said, hold on, I'll get it. And he had gotten this car in that had a gas cap that was hidden in the tail light. There was just 1 year they made these, apparently, or very limited. And they couldn't figure out. He says, we cannot figure out how to put gas in this. And Adam says, go to the back rear, blah, 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 and hit that, it'll open. That's where the gas goes in. When he was 5. Tell me he hadn't had a former life. And he knows things in this life that he can't account for, as do I. I was drawn to being a nurse, a caregiver. That was just something I felt drawn to, and I still do. But I have knowledge of medicine that I cannot account for. Mm-hmm. Things that I was never taught in school, things that I never did in my career. I can't account for it, but yet I know it. Mm-hmm. My son and I had a conversation about that a couple of nights ago. Actually, we were talking about a friend of his that had something wrong, and I said, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, gosh. He says, you told them exactly what the doctor told them. I don't know how I know it. And I wish I did. I was always a good student and I studied really hard, but I know what I learned and what I did. Mm-hmm. And these were things that I never applied to my career. So it's just a lot. It's a lot to me.
So I have a question. So I'm trying to make a connection here, and I'm trying to figure out a couple things. So I'm just going to go in a couple different directions here. So everyone just kind of bear with me for a moment. So for the longest time, I blamed or attributed to the abilities that I have come to recognize in myself. Acts of trauma, rewiring in the mind or the pineal gland. Where does this stuff come from? My goodness, how did you know that? I say, I just somehow, I just say it. I don't know where it's coming from, that kind of thing. And, then you get into the aspects of abduction, being a star seed, if you know what a star seed is.
My son is one. Is one.
Yep. And there, by the way, from what I understand from someone that I had listened to on a program probably 2 years ago, a lot of the kids that are being born these days are coming in as star seeds more so than anything else to somehow help the planet or something along that lines. But I'm going to aim this right at you and your family background. Did your parents or grandparents ever talk about the fact that they've had some kind of a UFO experience or anything along that lines? Or do you think your abilities come from a different set of genetics? Like I used to say when I was younger, oh, I don't know how I know that, but I think I got a good set of genetics compared to most people. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever say as a 13-year-old, but I couldn't figure out how I knew stuff all the time, and that was the only reference that I had. Where have you ever even discussed, especially with possibly those aliens and or beings behind that door and waving to you and stuff like that, where do you think these abilities really came from?
Well, I believe a certain set of my abilities did come through the lineage and my ancestry. I've learned a lot more since I embraced what I can do and what I am because I've researched it, I've studied it. And you have those aha moments where, oh, that makes sense. I remember this. That makes sense. But also, I think Appalachia plays a huge role in this because, and I heard these stories from the time I was old enough to sit on my grandpa's knee and listen to the stories sitting on the porch. There are things in those mountains that we don't understand. There is a paranormal aspect to the Appalachian Mountains that I don't think, unless you've lived there or have investigated a lot or embraced what happens there with a very open mind, because I truly, in the pit of my soul, believe that the Appalachian Mountains, being the oldest mountain range in the world, I mean, most people don't even know that. They were here before anything. I believe that is almost this, quote unquote, the center of the universe in a real way. There are things there that my family had seen. I've heard the stories about it, talked about it, the lights. Oh, the lights are going tonight. Was it a UFO? Maybe. I know that they have a lot of stories about, I'm going to use cryptids, Bigfoot. They have stories there. The one that I remember really vividly, we were sitting on the porch one night and we heard this horrendous howl. And when you live in the mountains, you know what sounds the animals make. You know if that's a coyote, if it's a wolf, if it's, you know what they are. You know the owl hoots, you know the birds, you know everything about it. And we were telling stories about, things that have happened in the mountains. And I was old enough that I remember this one really well because a lot of the family was there that night. I remember people were sitting on the edge of the porch and there weren't enough chairs for everybody. And we were talking about all this. Mm-hmm. Well, my grandmother came from a family of 9. And there was one son, his name was Jerry. And in this day and time, they would probably call him autistic or special needs. I'm not sure what his diagnosis would have been, but he was definitely not like everybody else. But and this is so horrible, and I hate to even say this. I remember asking my grandmother, what did you do with people like that when you had kids that were not able to go to school, so we just put them upstairs and didn't talk about it. And I remember her saying her exact words. And as I get older, I'm like, oh my gosh, it just hurt my heart. But they were talking about, you remember the night that we thought Jerry was pulling a trick on us because he was a prankster. He was always pulling pranks on everybody. He loved to make you laugh. That was his thing. And I remember meeting him several times as a young as a child, and he was that way. And he was very unique looking as well. And my grandmother was telling about the story. She says, yeah, we were all sitting on the porch one night when I was a kid. She says, olives were out there. It was a really hot summer night. And she said the yard kind of sloped down into like a little valley, and it was like covered with moss, and there was water coming down from the mountains, and just and the kids would play there. Well, they were all sitting there on the porch and just in conversation, not thinking much about it, and all of a sudden they heard this blood-curdling scream, literally. And my grandma says, she says, not a lot scares me, but that scared me that night, and that's how that was my grandma. And they said, oh, that's Jerry down there playing tricks on us again. Don't pay attention. So they continued on, and they saw movement down there. And this big creature, I don't know what the right word is, got up, covered in moss and leaves, got up, stood there for a short time, looked at all of them. And by that time, they all saw it. And about that time, Jerry walked out the door. And he came out of the house, so they knew it wasn't him. And they all just sat there. And I remember they said my great-grandpa said it's another one of them. So I believe that if you want to call them cryptids, Bigfoot, I don't know what you want to call them, Sasquatch, I don't know, but they are in the Appalachian Mountains. I absolutely trust 100% my ancestor stories. And I want to elaborate on those in my book as well, because I've collected all these, and I want these to be included, because that needs to be acknowledged. Do I pretend to know what it is? No. Do I want to know more? Absolutely. But if anybody wants to really get into something where the paranormal world is alive and well, it's in the Appalachian Mountains.
Oh, I believe that 100%, especially as wooded as it is there. Yeah, I have many guests who have actually seen Bigfoot. One that lives, I haven't had him as a guest yet, one who lives with Bigfoot. They do have the ability to cloak themselves. And I just interviewed someone just very recently. Apparently, I don't know what your Bigfoot in the Appalachian Mountains would like for a treat, but they do like raspberry-filled donuts, and that's their favorite treat. Yep, out of everything, and that's like a peace offering type thing. That sound, the noises, and everything that goes along with it, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the woods of the Appalachia or mountains definitely have something of that sort. Really, that's interesting. That would scare the out of me. But you know what? I've heard so many stories of things that have happened with them, and I don't know, the only thing that it's done to me is I'm not sure I want to entertain the idea of like even staying in any kind of a bed and breakfast or anything out in the woods per se anymore, because it's just, I grew up on a farm, so I know what it's like to have woods behind your house and all this sort of thing, and go explore them and the whole things. We never thought about that stuff growing up.
No,
not at all. No, especially hearing now that these things can cloak themselves. I haven't really heard of too many things with anything like that attacking in a directly attacking to hurt anybody. But that's fascinating. But along that lines, if that's one of the types of cryptids that might have been there. Oh, and by the way, yeah, the moss aspect doesn't surprise me, because here in Minnesota, we have a lot of swampy kind of areas. And sometimes, I've been told that they like to kind of hang out in these swampy kind of areas, and you don't ever want to walk by one and all of a sudden out of nowhere this monster comes out of the thing. So very, very, very interesting. The thing with your son though, and the gifts that he has, those are like prodigies. Those are like things that these kids can do that just aren't given as abilities to just anyone. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Usually there's a connection with a UFO or an otherworldly being that's connected with them, the starseed.
He went to Salem. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
He went to Salem, Massachusetts, just because he just wanted the experience of Salem. Knowing everything he knows, he identifies as a male witch. And he is very psychic, and he's got a lot of abilities. And they were just walking around having fun and doing the Salem thing. And he went in a shop that was apparently one of the OGs. this woman who has a shop. She's not just one of the tourist attractions. And there was this humongous line of people that were trying to get in to get readings from her, and she does the tarot, and she did a lot of the oracle cards, that kind of thing. And he was just thought it was fun. And he walked in, and she saw him, and she got up and went and grabbed him, and all these people were ahead of him, and she took him in a back room, and she said, "I need to talk to you." She says, "Do you know what you are?" And he's like, no. I mean, he's so understated and humble with, he never talks about it. And she told him, she says, "You are a starseed." And then they continued on and did an aura photo. And she said, "I've never seen an aura photo like that in my life." Mm-hmm. And she has actually stayed in contact with him. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's definitely something that I believe was passed down, but whether or not I believe there are portals, and I believe there are portals in the Appalachian Mountains, and I believe that's where those cryptids go to. You can call them whatever you want, but I think they're a higher intelligence and a higher level than we even know about. And the stories that my family has told, and my family, they were just old hillbillies, coal miners. I mean, they had no way of making up stories like this, but they all mesh. Every story has got a common denominator. And to me, that is what's so fascinating.
Well, the other thing about it is, think about this. They didn't have TV. A lot of them, there was no TV. There's no electricity.
Didn't have electricity forever. I mean,
my background is I have a set of grandparents. They didn't have electricity to 1950. They lived by candlelight. They had an outhouse. There was no running water inside the house. They brought pails of water in every day in the whole 10 yards. But what made it interesting for me is there was a discussion with my grandmother once where, now call it the Depression, call it what you want, but they were big believers in these touch doctors. And so maybe they were just cheap. I don't know. They didn't want to give a buck just for whatever. They couldn't afford to get real, it's not like it's not real medical care, but the medical care that we get these days. Mm-hmm. And so I always thought, well, isn't that interesting? They went to a touch doctor. Do they even exist where she lived? But they had the nature, the elements, the constant outdoors you're in the woods, you're listening, you're touching, you're feeling, you're seeing. Mm-hmm. That's what also made this very interesting too. But I'm just fascinated by the fact that, okay, let's talk about, he's your son. So did the father have any of these abilities? They came directly from...
None at all. Actually, didn't believe anything. We've been divorced a long, long time. It's another lifetime ago, but no, he was just, no. Would have actually made fun of you. That's why we didn't talk about it that much. I mean, we just didn't, but... we've always had a heart connection. Like, I'll go to call him and my phone rings, or I'll send him a song I love and he sent it to me at the same time. Or he'll say, "I was thinking about so-and-so the other day," and I can say, "I just talked to them." And we'd laugh about it. I mean, it happens so often we don't think anything about it anymore, but it's like our souls are crossed from prior reincarnations. And I do believe that. I absolutely believe that. That's the only accounting for a lot of the experiences that we've had. There's nothing else that would even come close to explaining it at all.
Well, I can relate to everything that you say, and it'll be exciting to talk with you after the fact. So now that you've had these abilities, and I understand about how sometimes you just have to stay quiet because you don't really know how you're going to be perceived or judged. Mm-hmm. So where does that take you next? Very fascinating background. You're coming into, or your abilities. Have they strengthened over time or remained about the same?
Well, it's kind of funny. I've always had an ability. It was something that I could control. It was something I could turn off. Never really thought that much about it, and I didn't even call it psychic. Mm-hmm. I just thought I've just got a little bit of a sixth sense that I know people, I know attitudes. I just wrote it off as being just kind of empathetic with people and very perceptive. And being in medicine, I dealt a lot with death. I was an oncology nurse. I was a trauma nurse. I was on the firing line of death and dying nearly every day of my career. And it started building, not to the point that it was even noticeable, but like I look back on a year, it's like, gee, would have never seen that a year ago, but all of a sudden I get patients coming in and I would kind of know that was the last time I was going to see them, and not from reading their chart or not. And sometimes perfectly healthy people that were doing okay, that had a prognosis of 5 years. And I get the phone call that, he passed away, or I remember one specifically, this woman, and she was a little difficult. She would only let me be her nurse. She would come in for checkups or whatever, and she would only let me take care of her. There were other nurses in the office, and she said, I want Emily. I'm like, so I always made a point of spoiling her a little extra because I felt like that's what I should do. And I saw her, and I put my hand on her to take her blood pressure, and I just saw this horrific crash, just metal and smoke and gore. And as a nurse, it was just overwhelming to me. And I just kind of shook it off. I'm like, ooh, I had a cold chill. I just kind of brushed it off and didn't say anything else. But I came home that night and I couldn't get it off my mind. Mm-hmm. And literally, she was supposed to come in for blood work a day or two later. And she was on my schedule for the lab. And I got a phone call from her daughter, and she was killed in a car accident the very next day. Jeez. So I had that. But then my real wow moment was when COVID hit. I had always had these abilities, brushed them off, didn't think anything about it, like I said, but I got COVID and I nearly died. I was unconscious for 11 days. They pretty much told my family, she's not doing well. And I kind of made peace with everybody. I told everybody goodbye because I would have lucid moments and I'd go back and I thought, and I believe it was a near-death experience because I did see, I'm not going to say I saw the other side, but I saw through a very thin veil. I felt like it wasn't my time, but I didn't know because I was too ill to even be that coherent. But by the grace of God, I started getting better. And I don't know why, because I fought for my life. I feel like I got better because my work wasn't done. And when I came out of it and I started to recover, I started seeing things that I had never seen before. Vivid. I mean, not just guessing or, it was like somebody had turned on a high definition television in front of me. And I started feeling things. And it made it very hard to go out because I would go out and it was just like I was feeling these people's emotions. And COVID was so emotional for everybody. I mean, it was a horrible time. And it was a time in my life that I questioned my existence because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And then I got really, really ill because I got COVID again. Not as bad as this first time I got it. Actually, it was the second time I got it. The first time they told me I had bronchitis. Second time I almost died. I got it the third time being in healthcare. Mm-hmm. Even though I was fully vaccinated and the whole deal, and I got too ill to do my job anymore. And then it just kind of changed my life because things I could do easily from my physical standpoint, I had to start using my mind, my brain. I started thinking through this and I really focused on it. And I saw things that I don't know how I'm seeing them now, but I think that near-death experience, I was jerked back from almost crossing because I feel like what I'm doing today is what my mission is supposed to be in whatever's left of my life here on earth. Mm-hmm. Not afraid to die. I was around people that were going to die every day and I lost patience. I started dealing with death and dying in a different way. I hope that I was a comfort to some of my patients that I lost, and some knew they were dying, and they would tell me, "Em, I won't see you again. I'm about done." And they would ask me to pray for them, and I did. I would pray to my ancestors to give them an easy journey and take them to the other side. I'm not going to profess I know what happens after we die, but I've seen the other side, and that makes me not afraid of dying because it's not what everybody thinks it is. I wish everybody could see it the way I did as nearly passing because it changes your soul.
So, can you tell us a little bit about what you saw? I have talked with several that have had near-death experiences. Have one in particular was actually she died for 12 minutes, and she saw a whole different world over there. What kind of world did you see when you passed away? But obviously was brought back.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I actually died, but I feel like my ancestors came around me in that time. Number one, as a comfort, because every time I would see them, I felt a peace that I've never felt on this earth, and a human to human contact, and a person to person, a living person contact. There was a peace, a warmness, a glow. I think what a lot of people confuse, they think heaven is the other side of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw heaven is about 3 feet off the ground from right where we are. The spirits are right there. They're just at peace. Their idea of heaven is where they're living. They're living the life they want to live. And to me, that's what heaven is. When God blesses you with the life that you've always dreamed of, it's not a mansion on streets of gold and gates of pearl. My personal would be a log cabin in the mountains with a stream and wildlife around me. That's my heaven. And that's where my ancestors are. And they came to me like that. And it was like I could feel, while most of the time spirits feel cool or cold to me, mm-hmm. They felt, it was like a warmth, a warm light. And they were around me. And they never came out and said, it's not your time. I would come back to levels of I was lucid, and then I would fade again, and lucid and fade again. It was just like they were there just seeing me through. But when I think of my ancestors, and today, after what I saw during that time when I was so ill, mm-hmm. I'm not afraid to die. This is just, death is not a final, it's a transition. Mm-hmm. Your spirit is energy. It never dies. Energy cannot die. It can transform. And that's what death is to me. In doing readings for people that are troubled or questioning, I've come across many spirits that with unfinished business. I've come across spirits with regret. Mm-hmm. I've come across spirits that don't know they're dead yet. I mean, I've done some very recent ones. They don't realize they've passed, and they're like, "Why is nobody listening to me? Why?" And they just don't realize. I've experienced all those things, and I had a reading. Oh, it's been, I don't remember, not too far back. This woman's son had died of an overdose. Mm-hmm. And she said he had a drug problem. She admitted that. And I told her, I said, he didn't overdose. He got a hold of something he shouldn't have gotten. And he wants you to know that he did not do that on purpose. There's more details, but I won't go into it. I keep my readings very private with no names, no locations, that kind of thing. This was just one that I remember vividly because he came through so clearly. Tell Mom I would have never done that. It wasn't, it wasn't my fault. And then I delved into it a little further, and I told her things that she was sobbing because everything I told her was exactly the circumstances, but they had kept things from her. Mm-hmm. And she walked away with a new sense of peace. And again, that's what I feel like my mission is with this. I don't do it for money. Do I charge? Yes, I charge, but it's just to cover my expenses. And I have a 501c3 charity that all of my profits go into. That I've had for years. I don't make a dime. I paid my expenses for my software, my free conference videos, and the things I do for people. I cover my expenses. I pay my admins, but I don't take a dime for myself. It's clearly a labor of love for my heart, and everybody I help. It just feels like I've done what I need to do that day. And I feel like the ancestors have blessed me because my page is really new. I only started on Halloween this last fall, and officially, I should say. And I already have almost 3,000 followers, and I am inundated with messages from around the world every day. And some are heart-wrenching, some are blessings, some are concerning. It's a whole myriad of emotions. And I think my nursing career helped me be able to deal with this because like I said, when you deal with unexpected every day as a nurse, it's kind of the same thing here, just on a different level. So
Let's go back for a moment. Yes, just before, and we've got plenty of time here yet, and we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that she does give readings and everything in the end. But one of the things I wanted to forewarn you about is that as you become real and you're popular the way it is. I knew somebody who was a psychic. He burnt out. He had like done 13,000 readings.
I can only imagine.
Yep. Well, start to because it may be happening after we get through this show. The thing is that when we do what we do as a labor of love, and we give our heart and we give our time and we have compassion for people, sometimes you have to charge. And that's what I wanted to be clear about before we get to the end. So, nothing should be free in this world, especially at the point where it starts to get to a point where it burns you out. And so we'll put that on the shelf just for a moment here. I want to go back to when you were a nurse. Did you work you worked obviously in a hospital, correct?
Yeah, I had some really great jobs. I did cardiovascular. I did oncology. I did trauma. I was on the cutting edge of they called the blood and guts of the medical profession for years. That was my career.
And so people always want to know. I've talked to some people that, and I know a nurse as well who also worked in cardio, and who used to see things happening in the work areas of which she did anyway. Sometimes people will report, the thing of death or whatever. I saw this black shadow go from one room or go into another room or go into a room, or things were being moved, or some people that had died would call the front desk and say, "I'm dead, come and get me." All kinds of weird stuff like that. Did you experience anything that you can recall while working in that type of situation, especially when you're around death, knocking on it? Have you ever encountered something that was just absolutely either frightening or startling, or what kinds of things did you experience?
It happened more often than I would even like to say, because at that time that I was doing the most traumatic part of my nursing career, it ramped up quickly. And I had to I would do a protection spell around me before I would go into work, because I had to shield myself from, because emotionally I had to keep myself stable to do the job I needed to do, because my job was life or death. I mean, what I was doing on a daily basis. I got to the point where I would know if somebody was going to pass, and it's not by reading their chart or not by, diagnosing or what the doctor said, or, I would get a feeling, because when a spirit is starting to pass, when they don't pass like in a car accident or, something that is quick. And when I do readings, I see quick deaths and I see deaths that are expected, but I could always tell when a patient was preparing for death, their demeanor changed. It was obvious to me. I don't know how obvious it was to others. I always tried to do my best to comfort the family as best I could, because some people don't deal with passing very well if they're not right with, their life coming to the end and they're losing a loved one or whatever. It was very hard sometimes. I would try to say comforting things, but some people were kind of dumb to it, that they just never picked up on it, and no disrespect toward anyone, but it was very hard on me, because I would know when I left that shift, when I came back, that person was not going to be there, but the family wasn't expecting it. And I was not in a position as a nurse to say, your loved one has 5 days, maybe if you're lucky a week. You just kind of deal with it, and you provide like the palliative care. I remember one specifically, and it was an older lady who was passing from she had heart. She was a cardiac patient, and her heart was failing quickly. And she had maybe 48 hours. And her daughter just went up one side of me and down the other, that her mom hadn't had a bath today.
Mm.
And honestly, had I done it a typical, got the aid in and done the bath, it would have probably killed her. I mean, she's so weak. I mean, she could barely breathe. And so I just said, well, I'll get a basin and we'll wash her down. Let's put some lipstick on, Mom. I bet she liked that because she was a very fixie kind of lady. You knew she was. She had really nice pajamas and cute things. And I said, I bet she'd like some lipstick. Let's comb her hair a little bit. Not that it mattered, but I hope that lady's sweet soul realized that somebody cared about her. And I think it made her daughter feel better. And I did things like that. When I worked in trauma, we had people that came in there that were just gasping in their last breaths. And they were like, that's when, calling on Jesus and trying to get right in the last minutes of their life. Some knew they were dying. Some didn't know they were dying. The last day that I worked, and I'll never forget this, it was absolutely insane. It was the last day I worked that they called in that they had a trauma patient coming in, that was an attempted suicide. Mm-hmm. And they brought this kid in. I think he was early 20s. Mm-hmm. And they warned us. They said, be ready. But so, I was ready. I thought maybe he'd tried to shoot himself. I saw a lot of stuff. And I think what I saw then prepared me for what I'm doing now, because I read it in a different way. They brought him in and he had tried to commit suicide with a bow and arrow. And he literally put the bow and arrow between his legs, pulled it, and shot himself through the bottom of his chin, and the arrow came out the top of his head.
Oh, good God.
And that was the last patient I had before I retired. And I'm like, this is time. I'm done. And my health was failing. And right after that, my health deteriorated quickly, and I couldn't do the job anymore that I was doing emotionally or physically. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I applied my nursing to what I'm doing now.
Interesting. You hear of these reports. Did you ever work in a facility where they had, some facilities have this, like the cat that crawls on the end of
the death cat. Yes. Yeah, in the nursing homes, the cat goes, well, that's funny you would mention that, because I have a cat. She's my little familiar, and she is a very unique little soul. Mm-hmm. She looks after me, and she knows me like the back of my hand. I mean, she's just so intuitive toward me. Mm-hmm. What most people don't realize is cats do not actually sleep. They go into like a meditative state, and they see through the veil that we can't see through. Mm-hmm. My little cat here, she's the one who alerted me to the little guy that's here in my house, the little boy. I mean, and she will be on the bed asleep, and he'll come by, and she'll look over and hiss at him and jump down. I mean, cats see things. People either love cats or hate them. And I don't understand people that hate them, because if they realized what they're capable of, they would love them, because they are literally a window to the other side.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm allergic to them, but it's not like I'm against them,
Right, exactly. And we all have that, yeah.
Let's talk about that little boy that you have in your house, because we briefly mentioned it before the show began. And I tell us a little bit about this little boy.
Well, when I first retired and got out of the nursing, I was home a lot. And I guess because I had more time, I noticed things more. I mean, I'm kind of OCD, so I kind of looked around and saw things, and I started feeling a lot of things. And I had visions. They were not dreams. I had a lot of visions. I would be doing a meditation, because I meditated a lot, trying to deal with a lot of things in my life, losing my career due to my health and a lot of things like that. And I was doing a visualization one afternoon. I was here by myself. And this little boy came to me. He says, I'm late for school. And I was like, I didn't hear that. I questioned myself. I'm like, I am losing my mind. I mean, I'm always the debunker. I always look for a reason, that's not an orb, that's a dust particle. That's not a shadow. That's a light reflection from the car outside. I look for every way to debunk everything that I ever come across. I want to disprove it other than prove it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of shook it off. And then I was around the house, and I would feel little like brushes against my leg. And I knew it wasn't my cat. My cat's sleeping in the other room. I knew I was home by myself. And And finally, I did a visualization, and he came to me. He says, "My name's Zachary."
Huh.
And I started like mentally, I was just, I said, talk to me. And he says, "I've missed school. I'm going to be in trouble." And I was kind of taken aback by it because he was obviously passed. I mean, and I would just sit and talk to him. I'd say, "Zachary, why do you think why did you miss school?" He says, "Because my mommy and her boyfriend didn't take me today, and they're going to be mad at me because I can't miss school. He's talked about he's going to miss coloring time. He talked about his school. He didn't want to miss it because he loves school, preschool." Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I said, "Zachary, where do you live?" He says, "Tennessee." And I said, "Where in Tennessee? Do you know?" He says, "Clarksville." And this was just so clear. It was startling to me because, I mean, I see clearly. If a spirit wants me to see them, I see and hear them very clearly. But this was just like a little kid that came to my front door wanting to know if I want to come out and play. Mm-hmm. And this is really emotional for me. I did an in-depth reading. I'm gonna cut to the chase on this because he's in my house and he has been for 2 or 3 years with me now. Mm-hmm. I won't send him to the other side because I don't think that's not what he wants. I think he's good right here. Mm-hmm. And he said, "My mommy's boyfriend didn't like me."
Oh, no.
And I said, "Did you have brothers and sisters?" He says, "I have one brother and one sister." And I said, and I saw his mother. I said, "Is this what your mommy looks like?" And he'd give me signals and signs and talk to me. I mean, I hear things that you may not hear, obviously. And the boyfriend had killed him. Mm-hmm. And he said he put a wire around my neck and he tied it really tight. And he says I couldn't breathe, and then I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Emily also told me before the show that sometimes he shows up behind her back, or
he does. He has. Mm-hmm. It seems like every time I do a podcast, or more times than not, he shows up in the podcast somehow. He's like a little trickster. He's always wanting somebody to notice him. Mm-hmm. And like I'm sitting right here at my coffee bar right now, next to my kitchen, and he always moves my tablecloth around. Mm-hmm. And I've done 2 podcasts now from 2 different people that have seen it, not just me knowing it, mm-hmm. That knew nothing about it. And they said, "What is behind you? There's been a little something behind you." Mm-hmm. And they say it's small. And I said, "Oh, that's Zachary. He's behind me. And it's usually to my left shoulder." Mm-hmm. And he's been on a couple of my podcasts. And he set off the motion detector more times than I can tell you because it has the little bell that goes off. And he sets that off. So, I mean, he is a very strong little spirit, and he's just made himself at home here.
He must be really shy today because normally I attract little spirit kids uh-huh. very easily. So I don't know. He must be taking a nap.
I don't know. My cat just made a huge dart from the living room across. So I don't know. But he's definitely around, and they have his little shadow in several podcasts that I've done, and they didn't know anything about him. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't told them anything about him. And I said, "Yeah, that's Zachary." I said, "Little short, dark hair?" And they said, "Yes." And so he's definitely been there. I mean, he's on video. So I don't know.
And so on that note, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and how they can find you, and then they can reach out to you from there.
I have a Facebook page called Appalachian Visions. It's got a lot of very interesting folklore and information about the Granny Witch. I'm determined to hang on to my heritage and pass it on to future generations, and so they know and respect it. The word witch has such ugly connotations. I'm trying to dispel that with my page, as well as offering my psychic abilities. I do readings, just like we're doing right now, back and forth in this podcast. You can sit on your couch at home, on your computer, and I talk to me just like we're doing right now. At your convenience, I schedule appointments. You can reach me through the messenger, or I have email, AppalachianVisionsTN gmail.com, and we will respond to you as soon as humanly possible. I just started my page in October. I officially started on Halloween this last fall because I determined that, this was time for me to do my thing. And I'm so glad I did. The response has been overwhelming. I have had people from around the world contacting me. I've become extremely busy, and I'm very proud of the work I'm doing. And if you would like to have a session with me, reach out and I will get you a reading scheduled as soon as possible. I do it I have 2 admins. I have no contact with the messages that come. They're the only ones. I only know the date and time of the reading and your first initial. I don't want to know anything about you ahead of time because it skews the reading. It will cloud the reading, and I may not be as accurate as I want to be for you. So it is completely anonymous. And anything that we discuss is always held in greatest confidentiality. No names, no dates, no locations. And I would love to help you if you've got a question in your life or a problem, or just want to contact somebody that has passed. Anything that a psychic can help you with, I would be very honored if you put that trust in me to help you.
Sounds good.
Reading.
Well, and you've heard it firsthand here, so we will have to have you back. There's a lot more we can talk about, and this was a really great interview today. And so on that note, and on behalf of the shows, Emily Ann, thank you so very much for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.